Hi, and welcome to the Gamemode Creative podcast. I'm Rainboom here with another episode and also with my co-host Meg. Hi, Meg.
Hello.
How have you been this past week?
Pretty busy.
Very.
I
I
think we've both
imagine
been
so.
busy.
Yes. If you asked me the same, it probably would have been, with work. I think I may have alluded to that in the last episode. And really just trying to figure out how to get all the time to go from things. Once I finish work, it's like there are a million things that I want to get to do, whether it's,
Right. There's so many
building
things to do.
or
Not
content.
enough time in one day for it
Yeah,
all.
like I'll bet you've got videos and things that you've been wanting to work on, and maybe you do get to them, but you don't actually get to them as much as you
Right.
want to.
And it's very appropriate for the topic that we're going to be talking about today.
Excellent timing. I guess it's a good thing we probably started it this way rather than any other way, so this is perfect segueing. I think this might be the best yet because today we wanted to talk
It
about.
was very natural. It's just the natural thing to talk about. Just talk about what we have to deal with every single day.
So if you're listening, I think you're going to hear how very personal these can get because they relate so much to our own lives, I think, at this point. So it should be fun. But again, we might discuss it. We might have something for you, but we just hope you will be able to maybe relate or just be able to weigh in on this in some way as you have done with previous episodes, which we're thankful for. But anyways, before I digress on that, the topic, if you haven't guessed yet, is related to time management. But we'll also probably be looking at multitasking, and that's another area. But we'll start with the big area of time management, which I feel like is something that I tell myself I want to get better at, but I'm not really sure if I actually have been getting better at it specifically. So I
It
think
seems
this is
harder
good.
and harder to get better at it too.
Yes. The
Because I'm
more
always wanting to do more and more.
Right, and the more things that come on my plate without me even, I mean, obviously work is something that I want to have, but at the same time, once you introduce that extra amount of whatever it is that takes up that much time in your day, then all of a sudden you've got much less time to everything else you wanted to do. It's like you need more than 24 hours in a day to be able to do everything you wanted to,
Yep.
Ever get that? I mean, probably this past week, I'm sure you have.
Oh yeah, there's always more that I want to get done every day and I never have time for. And part of it is because I don't manage my time well or I just distract myself too much. That's one of the things is trying to avoid distractions, which is very difficult because I feel
Oh,
like I could be getting so much more done if I
oh,
just didn't distract myself.
don't get me started on distractions. You know how easily I get distracted. And I've told you about all the different rabbit holes I've fallen into, whether it's on my own accord or even just in when I stream and stuff. But anyways, I was curious to kind of seeing how you have tackled or what your perspective on time management has been in your own experience.
Well, I don't have any uh clear thing I do to manage my time because I think a lot of it does boil down to self-discipline, which we did talk about in a previous episode.
Yes.
But I have tried. You hear a lot of times people try to like schedule their time or dedicate 1 hour a day to this task or so on and so on. I have tried that before for some things that I wanted to work on consistently, and I can never stick to it. It really does depend on what it is. Because there's so many things I want to learn to do that I just don't have time for, and then I end up spending all of my time on the things that I currently do, but then that leaves no time for the new stuff. And that's what I struggle with a lot. And lately, what I've been dealing with is trying to balance my time with some new stuff that I've been wanting to do for a long time while also continuing the old stuff. And that's where it gets a little bit tricky.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't have any like set way I do it. I think I just try to dedicate a little bit of time. I don't really put it on a schedule or anything or say I'm going to put this amount of time into it, but I just make sure to work on it at least a little bit every day. Just a couple things. While
Okay,
I
so
could probably be getting more done, again, I just get distracted way too easily.
but yeah, so I guess your plan
But
kind
but
of
how about
adapts.
you?
Yeah, as you go. So I guess like you take it sort of, you adapt your plan or your approach to it depending on whatever you have on the plate. Now, Like ideally, I've told myself I wanted to list everything I wanted to do, maybe put it like on an aside or a list of backlogs or things to say that, oh, I'd like to do this, because I do definitely find myself, not even if I just want to say, oh, I'd like to learn, well, actually kind of is like that, because it'll be sort of, things are, oh, I'd like to do this, and then it'll I'll all of a sudden try to squeeze time into it, into my day for it, and then find myself, jumping back and forth between things that I've already wanted to do, and then having these new things come in, and then just all of a sudden my attention starts going in that direction. I find that it has been challenging for me as well. And even those aside, let me start with just my basic, day-to-day, assuming that I don't have anything new coming in. Even that in itself, like I've just said, as long as I get through the certain X number of things I wanted to get through in the day, especially usually these are things that maybe like for work, if I list them the previous day, and then maybe things show up later in the day, then I'll get through them, sure. And then for my personal ones are a little harder to manage time on, because I am my own boss, and I think I'm a little too lax on myself because I don't have enough timelines set. However, not as rigid as a schedule, but at least kind of these little bits of progress of, oh yes, let's see if we can get through, I'm going to take my city project again as an example, this district by the end of this month, or something like that, or having a soft timeline, or maybe connecting back to short-term goals, honestly, and setting my time that way. So then how I manage things in the week, I guess now it's weekly, because daily is no longer part of the question, since I now have work, which takes up most of my time. But once I start introducing, like how you said it, with lots of new things I wanted to get to, I think in my case that kind of is my distraction as well, because of the fact that I already have something going on, and then all of a sudden I'm trying to, for something that I have shifted my attention to, squeeze that into all of my existing timetable, really, and trying to figure out, and then all of a sudden my schedule falls apart. And at the end of the day, on some days, I'll be going to bed thinking, wow, that was a waste of the day, because I didn't get anywhere with something. Let's say I got somewhere with what I wanted to, but not as far as I would have liked to ideally. It's like that. Or even, as I told you about the rabbit holes, sometimes that'll end up happening too. The worst I have found is when I start looking for inspiration for something. That is probably one of the best examples, where there's this one, let's say I'm looking for pictures of a building that I'm trying to get some inspiration for, and all of a sudden there'll be a link somewhere, and whether it's my mind will go, oh, I wonder what this is all about, and then the rabbit hole starts from there. I start diverting from what I originally intended on looking for, and now I found myself starting to look for, let's say, I'm trying to think of something random, horses or something. How buildings transition into looking for horses, and all of a sudden 2 hours are gone. So it's like one of those things where I just have to, it comes back to my own self-discipline too, as you probably have known. It really is just that, I think, for the most part. So I myself, long story short, I certainly am still looking for, trying to figure out where my time management goes. I've told people it's good, and it's not abysmal, but there obviously is a lot of room for improvement. I know, for self-development, and even just generally, I think that's where it is. I think it's the biggest thing for me is, like, I've pointed out a few things in my area, but I wonder how hard it is to try to actually diagnose where the time management problem might be, if there is a time management problem. Have you ever had an issue like that?
Try to determine the source.
Trying to determine the source of the problem.
For me, it would be the source of my distraction, which oftentimes is browsing through social media or YouTube or something like that. That's usually my number one distraction. But I wonder if we probably shouldn't be too hard on ourselves, though, if we, because I know some people ask me how to manage your time, or like, how do you manage your time? And for me, I honestly have a lot of free time. I can't deny that, because I'm single. I don't have a family I'm taking care of or anything like that. So,
in that sense, yeah.
Yeah, in that sense, like, I have all this free time. So, and I still struggle with my time management, but I still can do a lot more than other people can. And I think it can be misleading to some people, because they might see all what I'm capable of doing, but they might have even less time than me. Yeah. So for people like that, maybe their problem isn't distractions. Maybe their problem is they've just got too many other responsibilities,
That's possible, yeah.
So in situations like that, I would say, like, as long as you're putting just even like 5 minutes, which isn't much, even if you just put a few minutes a day on the little thing you're doing. And I have heard this said before. I have heard this multiple times in videos all over YouTube where they say if you put, if you just tell yourself, okay, I'm going to work on this thing for 5 minutes, then you'll end up putting half an hour into it before you realize it. Just little things like that. So a lot of times we think we don't have time for something when we really do. It's just, again, takes the self-discipline for us to sit down and to do it.
Oh, yes. Absolutely.
I don't know if that actually answered your question. I was just kind of rambling there for a bit.
No, I think that kind of works, because another thought came to mind on the other hand, where I've heard schools of thought that say, some people that work with constraints, like time constraints, actually end up being able to make the most out of their time because of the constraints. Obviously, in excessive constraints, that's a very different story. That because obviously, if the amount of tasks you have outweighs the amount of time you have, then you're not going to get anywhere. But like people who, now again, this isn't you when you described yourself as having a lot of time, being people that have like all the time in the world, and then trying to figure out how to properly fill it. Exactly. So this doesn't apply to you, but it just came to me because I figured that as we know, you have constraints because you've got work and things throughout your weekday and that sort of thing. But people who work with constraints, having some of those constraints kind of helps. You may think it might actually hamper on your time, but it also might give an opportunity for you to be able to at least build whether it's an actual rigid or just a loose schedule from somewhere, so at least to give your thoughts some guidance. Like, that's something that I've heard. I guess it really depends on whatever you're up to. I know that I might have done it subconsciously, where I said, okay, if I've got this happening tonight, everything else is going to have to get pushed back in some way, shape, or form. So even that slightest bit of a thought, I guess, is already time management when you think about it too, very possibly. And just, I guess maybe I'm one of those people that have too many constraints. It's very possible. Like, I'll try to fool myself into thinking, Rainboom, you've got all these tasks in the day, work included, yet I'm sure you'll still be able to squeeze in a little bit here and there. I have found, though, that because I get distracted very easily, even trying to spend 5 minutes on something has been challenging. Some people have said it's like it takes at least about 20 minutes to get really focused in on a task. I've heard some studies that have said that.
When I go into work in the morning, it takes me at least 20 minutes to get into work.
Right. Or the worst is someone will disrupt me and say, hey, you want to go for a coffee break? And I'll be, okay, sure. And they come back and I'm like, what was I even doing before I left?
Right.
It's one of those kinds of things. Or someone has to say, hey, Rainboom, I need help here with this. And then you go and help them. And you come back and you're going, what was I doing to begin with? And stuff like that just shows how distracted I am, and I guess I kind of fall into that 20-minute demographic. But we've had a lot of, like, our company's been trying to give us all these sorts of tools to help us manage our time. But I'm thinking, though, obviously, if you're listening and you don't actually, may not necessarily have access to various tools, you may have access to them, and if they've worked for you, then great. Do you actually? Well, I mean, you said, Meg, you don't actually have any schedule, or you don't really rigidly schedule things, but do you have any, like, tools or anything, whether it's a soft, like a logical thinking thought process or whatever it is, that kind of, or whatever, helps manage your time? If that kind of is questioned or phrased properly.
I don't have anything that helps me schedule things, but I do sometimes make a to-do list. Not that it's the same thing, but I think it does help me to write down everything that I want to get done. I never can get it all done, and sometimes there's things on my list of things to do that are on there for like weeks before I actually get around to them. But just having them there is it reminds me, oh yeah, I need to do that. And just the fact that it's on the list at all makes me want to do it, so I can mark it off. So
that's true.
In a way, that kind of motivates me to actually do more, because when I see it there, I'm like, oh, that's right, I do need to do that. And then I'm like, do it just so I can, like, oh, I did that, let's check that off the list.
True, and then look back at the checklist and say, oh wow, look at all the stuff I got done, or something like that.
It really does help having a list of everything you want to accomplish.
Absolutely.
Even if you don't get to it all, like, just knowing it just keeps it always on the edge of your mind, so you always want to get back to it.
As long as you don't start adding things in the middle and pushing all
I always
the
do
extra
that
to-dos
too.
back down.
I keep like, add that to the list, add that to the list.
Yeah, right, exactly. So then by the time you look, I'll say, oh, look at all these things. Oh, wait, I forgot about this, but now I've got this thing to do, and then all of a sudden it becomes all sorts. Again, like, that's something that I would probably find myself doing. I could very easily fall victim to, but oh, for sure, I can definitely imagine. Like, even for me at work, there's nothing more satisfying than when you see an entire block of a checklist just scratched out because you completed it, or you cross it off and say, yes, I got this done, and then the following day's checklist is so much shorter, or whatever the case is, and you're thinking, oh wow, this is actually not bad, or anything like that. So
until you add more to it the next day.
Yes, exactly. Or your page fills up with all other sorts of things, and then you have to rebuild your checklist, or whatever the case may be, which is kind of me. I've started using when they have OneNote and that sort of stuff for keeping track of things, but my notes are a mess. Like, I thought that it was going to help. Well, in a sense it does, just so that searching things is easier instead of flipping through a notebook, but my notes basically look the same, where everything's all over the place. So all of my scheduled times there might be something on the far right side. It looks like some kind of I'm not really sure how to put it, but it's like one of those really messy draft books, or whatever those things are, with ideas left, right, they're scribbled everywhere. So I have to figure out how to properly say, oh, this is a task, and put them together back on the list for the following day, and hope that it all holds together. But that's a completely separate thing related to organization. I think we can talk about in a separate conversation, which is no problem. So let me take us back to the idea of time management. Meg, did you what's been your I guess back to scheduling, what are your thoughts on, I mean, you kind of started talking about it a little bit, but do you have anything else you wanted to add to that particular conversation?
Well, the only thing I really try to schedule anymore is live streams, and even then I don't schedule that for every live stream, just one live stream. And that is another way of helping me manage my time, because I pretty much dedicate the one thing I stream on Saturdays. I only ever do it when I'm streaming. So in a way, I do schedule some things like that, but most of the time I just use my to-do list.
Right, for
and
things
then
like,
and I just make sure to spend at least I also have to prioritize things. So I look at my list, I know, or even I have a list in my head of all the things I want to get done that day, and I just have to prioritize it. And I know I'm not going to get to everything. Sadly, this is why many of the things I want to do are never ever started, because they're just not a priority at the time. It's so sad. But
it's almost like you wish you want to copy yourself a few times so every individual Meg could take them on.
We joke in my Discord server, in my community, about having a Meg farm, because we need multiple Megs doing everything. I really want my Meg farm.
Right, yeah, you'll get one doing the streams, or there's one doing the video edits and all that stuff.
Yes.
And then there's the one taking all the new tasks on, and then transferring the knowledge to all the other Megs in the Meg farm to be able to, whatever the case is, like that.
That would be my dream.
Hey, you know what? You never know. One day it might actually come across in some way, or whatever the case is. But no, I can see that with because I don't know, maybe it's just something with streams. I really don't know. Largely because I don't know if I could block the same amount of time for something like, let's say I'm going to dedicate these 3 hours with building this or working on this. Like, I'm not sure. I'm sure that you've been able to block time off in your evenings for, say, if you're working on a video, like your latest project, for example, in the same way that you block time off for streams. I pretty
much just make sure to work on it at least, for 1 or 2 hours every day. And some days I just don't feel like it too. Like, that's another thing. Like, if I don't feel like doing it, I'm not going to do it.
Right.
But I also want to feel productive. I also don't want to be wasting that time. So, and it is okay, like, if you end up with like a lazy day where you do nothing, but if it's important enough to you to work on these certain tasks, then I guess you just need to get more self-discipline at that point. If you really want to do something, but
it ties right back to that point. But for something like, let's say if you had a scheduled stream and you weren't feeling like streaming that day, do you go by that emotion, or do you say, no, I have this scheduled, let's go do the stream for whatever particular reasons there may be?
Well, currently I only schedule the one stream on Saturdays, and so I'm actually surprised I have been doing it for so long, because I did try scheduling streams before this, or I can't remember the exact schedule, or maybe I'm thinking of scheduling uploads, because that's a completely different feeling that I couldn't handle because it was too stressful for me. But maybe scheduling the live stream, even I do it even when I don't feel like it. I think at this point it's just because it's been a habit for so long. But I don't think it would have always been the case. Like when I first started streaming, like if I didn't feel like streaming that day, I wouldn't stream. But for some reason, I've been doing the Saturday streams so much that I just do it whether I feel like it or not. And the only way that might affect the stream is I might just stream for less time if I'm not really feeling up to it. But yeah, I do make it a point to do that, because, as I alluded to earlier, it is the only time I ever do work in that survival world. So I do feel like, oh, I'm actually, being productive and working on this, because this is my only time to work on this, is when I'm streaming. So that also helps, because it's something that I don't do any other time of the week.
Oh, that's true.
So I only do it then.
I see. And probably because also, since you got people watching you too, so there's sort of that, not really a pressure, but there's kind of that that notion that you get when there are people watching you do this, to
sometimes I do feel like I'm obligated to do it. I will admit that.
No, but like even during like the actual act of streaming, being there and being able to get through that task, so it's like you actually have to do something, rather than you'll have it on the side, or
even aside from my scheduled streams. I have done live streams during the week that I just did not feel like streaming, but I did it anyway, because I thought, oh, maybe I'll like get over this feeling of not wanting to do it. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. So
But making that initial leap of let's see if this will work was really what did it, because you may as well try. But
either way, no matter how I felt, I was accomplishing something. I was doing something.
That's true. So. The time passed in a way that probably was more favorable than what could have happened if you didn't spend your time doing it that.
Right.
Or whatever the case is. Yeah, I see. I guess maybe that might be something that I may have to try. Maybe reinstate some of those streams, or maybe even like put off some of the tasks.
It's been a while since you streamed.
It is. I think the last one I did might have been that Tuesday stream, February 22nd. Oh, wow,
that was 2 months ago.
Something like that.
Tuesday was 2 months ago.
Yes.
At the time of this recording, that is. I don't know when.
I
don't know when this is going to get published.
Right, because if you're listening to this from the distant future, well, actually, I shouldn't say that, because I really don't know what the distant future is by the time you're listening to this. But this would have been recorded just a couple months out from February 2022. When it comes out to you, we don't really know, because of my own pace of putting these things out.
Because our time management getting these podcast episodes out is not the greatest.
Yeah, there you go. This is an excellent example of what not to do if you're looking for the right way to manage your time for a podcast or for creative things.
I think a lot of it, in terms of the podcast, a lot of it is because maybe we just don't prioritize it enough. Obviously, we do want to still work on it, and we do still want to make episodes, but we don't have it as like our number one priority of the week. And that's why we haven't been recording them as often, but we still like are just as interested in working on it. It's just not a priority right now.
Yeah, and plus, like, again, the whole reason we came to it was all just for fun too, but in a way that would have been informative and kind of helpful, or even just to be able to give you an opportunity to listen to a conversation being had about topics like this. So it kind of is like one of those side interests of ours, but it's one of our most active side interests. But again, the keyword is the side interest, because of our primary working conditions throughout the week. So there is that. So then that's why I thought I probably should do the same thing with streaming, because then what would help is that it would offload my mind. I'll say, it also could speak back to discipline, in the sense of, okay, I'm not going to touch this item at all throughout the week, so I can remove it from my week. If I had plans or things I wanted to do, I'll list them down, and then by the time I get to what I wanted to that dedicated time on whatever day of the week it is, then I can go and spend that dedicated time, whether it's like through stream, as you mentioned, and if that might be, in my case, it's applicable, I guess, because if it's, for building and that sort of thing, and then just touch on that activity during that particular time window and that sort of thing, so that I don't deplete my excitement throughout the week and then find myself getting distracted or bouncing from project A to project B. If you kind of get what I mean, where it's, I hold all of that anticipation for that task or whatever it is for the blocked time I have off in the week. Like, again, taking your example of your Saturday streams, Meg. Like, if I guess that you have all of the things you want to do on it probably planned out, or you list them as ideas come to you throughout the week, and then you try to execute them on that Saturday or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So that you don't kind of exhaust your time throughout the week and maybe fall into the trap of finding out, oh wait, this, whether it doesn't work, or you'll find yourself doing other things. I'm sure you don't do this, but I was just using you as an example, where you'll find yourself doing other things compared to what you originally had planned for that one particular day.
Yeah, usually I don't plan things for my stream, which is also a bad thing, because I usually enter the stream being like, oh yeah, I need to do all of this stuff, and I completely forgot.
But hey, you know what? It's entertaining watching you even just mining, honestly. If you put yourself in, whether it's just listening to the sounds of, well, don't take this the wrong way, especially if you're listening and you're not familiar with Minecraft sounds, which, although I'm sure you might be, but just listening to it as background noise, if you insta-mine things, like for an entire cave or something like that, or just start placing or building, even if you aren't talking, even that still can somehow, I guess, to me, it can be entertaining in some occasions. But obviously your commentary obviously always adds more to it, if anything, But no, that kind of ties back to the to a different topic. But let me take us back into, actually, you know what, maybe I should just go right into distractions, because I guess that kind of does tie into time management in a sense. Is it's the enemy of time management, and I think that's, like, to me, if I were to try to, when I go back to what I mentioned about diagnosing or figure out what my problem was, it's that not only could it be the infinite amount of things I'd want to get through in a week or even just a day or whatever, it would be the distractions that come through. Because I'll admit, lately I've found myself, and this is no word of a lie, where I'll tell myself I'm going to sit down, I'm going to want to try to chip away at this build or plan for it. And I think the worst part is planning for it, because if I'm not in game and in the Minecraft environment starting to build, I'm probably looking for inspiration or trying to draw things out or plan or anything like that before it comes into the world. But during that planning, as I mentioned, where searching for something that was supposed to be inspiration becomes this rabbit hole about another thought that comes to mind, and I'll say, oh wait, this came up, I better go ahead and check this out. And aside from what I mentioned earlier, just new things that come into my mind and into my schedule just come, like, again, there might be things like, oh, they're urgent action items I do have to act on, and sure, I'll take to those. But other, whether it's another personal interest thing that kind of comes up to mind, right?
It's prioritizing whatever comes up.
Exactly. And so sometimes what happens is, because I take too much to that spur of the moment, where you'll grab onto that excitement of, oh yes, I do have this, and act on it right away instead of prioritizing where it should be, then you will fall into the trap that I do, where it becomes whatever, you may find yourself going down the rabbit hole, or being swayed into a completely different task, and then to come back and find, oh wait, I've lost X amount of, or this much time, and either you've forgotten, you've gotten distracted, or you kind of have to refocus on what you were doing originally, or just you lose motivation entirely and just say, all right, I'm going to call it a day, and that wasn't very productive at all. If that makes any sense, I might be rambling right now, actually, come to think about it, but it's basically that, right? So just I guess it is trying to prioritize it, isn't it? We know that it's really hard, I guess, maybe, well, in the stream environment, to distract you, Meg. But how have you tackled, or what has been your experience with distractions?
With distractions? Oh, yeah. Everyone in my Discord is really good at distracting me. I mean,
myself
I am
excluded. I think I'm terrible. I'm terrible at it.
I don't know. I mean, when it comes to things like Discord distracting me, sometimes there's nothing more you can do than just like close the app, and just
Oh
like
yeah.
just try to your best to avoid all contact with anything. Or like if I'm like browsing through social media, I'm like need to close everything down and I don't know, just play some music in the background, get my mind on something else.
Hmm.
I don't really have any set way of avoiding distractions. You just kind of have to do it.
Or as an extreme emergency, in my case, hope my laptop shuts off because the battery's low or something, and
Or
then
I
I'll
make a deal with myself
snap.
sometimes.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I make a deal with myself, say, okay, wait, I'm going to avoid distractions for 1 hour, work on this video, and then I'll read the Discord again. Sometimes I have to do that. So,
Oh. I guess it depends. Maybe it might be probably for somebody it might be easier said than done. However, that just comes right back. I think, although this might sound harsh, but I think it comes back to the idea of self-discipline to be able to pull that off. I think, especially like anything you probably would have to do with yourself is probably the hardest because you're in control of yourself. It can sometimes be hard to establish those kinds of even something like that bargaining you were discussing, and
yep.
unless you are able to hone in on your self-discipline,
It is
and
important to allow some time for relaxation. Like, I don't want it to sound like you have to schedule every minute of your day, because I feel like half of the time when I say I'm distracted, it's really also me winding down. Like, when I get back from work, the last thing I want to do is sit down and immediately start working on videos. I do it sometimes anyway, but that doesn't mean it's healthy necessarily. Like, I feel like a lot of times when I am browsing, it's just me, kind of unwinding from work, and then I try to get into working on my own projects. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but
right.
there is a point where you can try to minimize your distractions if you can tell it's hindering your productive time.
Because I hope you're not skipping meals when you come home from work and say, "Oh,
Well,
let me go right into my YouTube or whatever."
I have
video
done
prep or
that
something,
before,
right?
not on purpose. I get too engrossed in what I'm working on, and I just forget the time and all that.
That actually might be a good point, tying back to time management. When you get so engrossed in something, and then you all of a sudden, you spend so much time, and then you don't realize, and you lose track of time. You don't realize how much time has passed.
Right.
That could
So
possibly
sometimes you can
like
be too efficient.
Yeah, and then end up losing
Sometimes
time.
you can, yeah. So in a way, if you manage your time too well for some things, you also are missing out on other important things.
So it's
Again, I guess it goes to prioritizing, but
perhaps, yeah.
even like if your intentions are good, like, oh, I'm going to get all of these things done, but then maybe you're neglecting to do something else that's equally as important.
Oh, absolutely. So it's like lack of time management can either be just mishandling time where nothing gets done, or being super good at being able to squeeze in whatever, like, being so focused in on the one thing. Now, obviously, if you're in a flow, then, you may as well do whatever you can, and within reason, because, we don't want to be having, if you're listening, we don't want you to break your flows just because, oh, we should block only this much time, and that sort of thing to be able to get through all the tasks you want. I mean, you could multitask, but I think that's a whole different conversation on its own, because multitasking as a solution to time management is possible, but I think good execution can be very tricky. I know that the best example that comes, unless you have other points, Meg, I'll continue on with this particular point.
All right,
but
that's fine.
So basically, it's streaming is the best example of multitasking, because I know early on when I started, I'm sure, Meg, you can probably testify to this or agree, where you're either building or doing whatever. Like in our case, Meg and I usually build in our streams, do something, whatever the case is in Minecraft. And either you're focused on what you're doing in there, either, I said. So either you're building or you're watching chat and trying to follow up and keep up with everything that people are trying to say. Or if they will say, oh yeah, they'll send, they'll have a message directed to you, but sometimes I know that I have started to find myself, especially as the more messages start showing up in that chat box, and you're thinking, okay, I look all of a sudden, like I look away from there for a moment, and start building and continue. And the moment I look back again, it looks like a whole different chat box has come up, and I'm going, how many messages have I missed? And, feeling bad that, oh, somebody tried to send something, but it looked like they weren't heard or whatever the case is. I'm sure you've probably had experiences on this as well.
See, that's interesting, because I don't normally think about streaming as multitasking, at least not in that sense. As far as reading the chat and then doing what I'm doing in the stream, I always think of that as one thing I'm doing. But if I were to describe multitasking when live streaming, it would be my thought processes, which maybe that's the same thing what you're saying. You're trying to focus, you're trying to read what they're saying and also think about what you're doing. But another thing that I sometimes do is if I'm working on, well, it could be any video, really. If I'm working on a build for a video, I'm also, in addition to those two things, I might also be thinking in my head about how the video is going to go. And I might be coming up with ways of how I'm going to edit it or what I can do. Like sometimes those thoughts just pop up in my head in the middle of a stream. Like I just think of them. I'm like, and then like, I'm like thinking about all these things I'm going to do after, or I'm thinking about that too. Thinking about, all the stuff I'm going to do after the stream is over. And
so it's kind of like your mind,
have to do.
Like your mind kind of jumps ahead of itself all of a sudden. And you start to really start planning ahead, but in a different way, I guess, while you've
I don't know if that's
active
the same
task.
thing as multitasking, but I definitely am trying to think about multiple things at once.
Yeah, I guess it kind of does, because your mind basically, I guess, well, how the way I consider multitasking is once your mind is split between at least two different things, and even if it isn't you actually doing two different things, even if you might be thinking about two different things, I feel like that's kind of where multitasking could even begin, because those two different things could actually lead to two different actions, whatever the case may be, even if it's just thinking and acting, but you're still doing two different things. So, and that just shows how easy it can be to start getting into multitasking, but then to execute it, I think, is a whole different story, because I know that, again, what I end up defaulting to is one or the other, and when I do both, it kind of is like that. My energy is now split, or my focus is split 50-50. So sometimes I might butcher something I'm building or butcher something I'm saying. And I hope it's not something that I'm saying, because at least if I'm building and it's not survival, I can fix it. But once I type something in that box that was either, or not type or reply in a sense, it's heard. I can't take that back anymore. I can't rewind time. If we all had the ability to slow time, that'd be amazing. But
that's what makes the streams entertaining, though.
Exactly, right? Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it's like one of those things where your mind, at least in my case, sometimes what'll happen is when you try it, your mind just says nope, and then sticks right into just one of the tasks that you're doing.
See, maybe I just don't struggle with that as much. Although sometimes I do get like really involved in my building, and I kind of forget to read chat, and then I'm like, wait, what is chat even talking about? Sometimes that does happen. But
that's fair.
I guess the ability to focus on one thing more than another, I guess that depends too on the individual, because we all have different attention spans and all of that. And for me, it also depends on what I'm doing. I seem to do better splitting my focus when live streaming, but when I'm doing something like editing, I cannot split my focus with that. I have to be all in it, or else I can't get it done. Like, I don't know. I probably have tried editing while we were in a Discord VC before, and I just can't do it. It's too distracting, because I'm trying to listen to myself and listen to the people. And so it depends on the circumstance. And I'll probably depends on the person too.
Oh, yeah. Again, I'm sure you don't mean offense against anybody when you say that, but
no,
sort of like,
I'm just saying I can't listen to two voices at the same time. And,
exactly. Yeah, because like I was gonna say that I imagine that in those instances when you were in a VC and we were chatting at the time you happened to be editing, I'm sure that
and that's another
levels. Yeah.
Well, it's also another example of me letting myself get distracted. Like I should have just not been in the VC, but I wanted to be in the VC, but I also wanted to edit. I'm like, I can't do both.
Oh yeah.
So
actually, yeah, there are some times when, even for my case, if it's I'm supposed to be editing something, like whether it's audio for an episode of my show or something, and I'll say, hey, look, there are people in the VC, let me go and see what they're up to, and then immediately, boom, that's a distraction. Now obviously not in the sense like I
it's
know
not
that
a bad distraction though.
right,
it
exactly.
Is good.
When we say this, we like being there, and that's obviously the reason why we've come in the first place, right? Otherwise we would look at it
you
and
should
say,
allow
oh, hey,
yourself
there are
some
people.
time to like spend time with people and have fun, like
absolutely.
obviously.
But then
not
when
all distractions are bad.
exactly right. But then when I tack on something else, then you start to see the battle of two different things happening, where you're like, okay, where is my time
I
supposed
would
to be
say
divided? And
it only becomes an issue if what you're supposed to be doing is actually urgent, or I don't know, like if it's actually something that important. If it's something like me editing a video, that's not really important. It's just a hobby. I just do it whenever I have time.
Oh yeah. In that case, like hobby versus actual other urgent matters,
like actual
I think
responsibility.
you should know where your priorities are as a result.
Right.
Yes.
So.
But no, when it's with, I guess the trickiest part then is when you want to try to get through with personal things. And I think that might be something where when we're tying all this time management and multitasking and that sort of thing, and distractions even, that's probably the hardest part, again, because it is personal. And I think that's the key word. And even with streams, because you introduce the element of other people that are present with you as well, right? Because when they tune in, they're assuming that, or there's that notion again that there are people that are watching you doing something, and you kind of feel like, oh, I probably should do something, so it kind of eggs you on to be able to accomplish whatever task you or tasks in that stream. But when you're by yourself, it's like there's nobody present, so you're kind of just using yourself as the judge of, okay, well, am I gonna do this now, or should I go hop into this VC while or I'm gonna edit this now, or it's like, I think that's where the biggest trouble comes, and some of the hindrances with personal projects. I imagine that probably could be it. But then again, as you mentioned, it kind of probably just ties right back into prioritizing. Now, obviously, we don't want, by saying this, I should mention right away that we don't want you to prioritize people over, certain people over other people, or get that involvement, because there could be a whole drama of things that takes place. And we're not trying to say that. I think it's just a matter of every activity you may have will probably find itself a place in your let's say, just like as a time span in your week in some way, shape, or form. Like whether it's just blotting a little bit of time on it,
I guess a good way to look at it, if this helps, I guess a good way to look at it is,
please
if you can get through your week, let's just say week, it doesn't matter what the time frame is.
I guess we just use week because it just seems like
if you get through the end of your week and thinking about what you did every day, or even the end of the day thinking about what you did that day, as long as you have no regrets, I think you're doing a good enough job.
That's a good way to put it, yeah. Because the last thing you want to do is to end the day thinking, "Wow, I really wasted that day" or something, and just get yourself down.
Now, sometimes I do feel like that, like, oh, I had all this time, I could have been spent doing something, but I did get all of these things done, so it didn't feel like a complete waste. So I rarely have regrets, even though a lot of times I'm like, oh, I wish I could be doing more, and I do distract myself, but I still rarely have those regrets. And I think that's probably the most important thing, is as long as you get to the end of the day and you feel like you've accomplished something, then maybe just not overthink it is what we need to do.
That's very true, yeah. Or as you said, just try to find or examine your day and think, where are the accomplishments or things that I got to do, and look for those positives. Or sometimes what I do is, obviously, we don't really know for certain, but when I usually, what I say is sort of, I've got this day ahead, so kind of that excitement. So even if I may regret whatever I was not able to do the previous day, I'll say, hey, I've got this day coming up ahead, let's see what I could possibly do, and then kind of try to let that excitement of the new day come in, so that you don't get bogged down the following day thinking of carrying that regret over into the following day, but rather it becomes sort of an excitement to say, hey, here's another chance at me being able to try to do this possibly, or something like that.
Again, have your to-do list, and if you have stuff that you didn't get to that day, just try to get to it the next day.
Add it on, even if it means pushing back something that you really wanted to do previously from a few weeks ago.
Yes.
Even if it gets longer, at least you'll get to be able to check it off at some point.
Checking off one thing off a list, it just makes you feel accomplished. At least it does
hugely.
for me.
hugely,
Even
especially.
if it's little things like get
Yeah.
your laundry done, like that's a big thing. Like,
Uh-huh.
oh, I actually got laundry done today.
Absolutely, absolutely. Even if one big task has a bunch of subtasks, and however you want to break it up, even in getting one of those little things there is already, I think it feels very accomplishing, if anything. And it kind of probably does help once you start to, I guess, once you start to see whether it's a pattern or kind of just you observe how you complete tasks, and then maybe that's where time management kind of just comes in naturally, where you'll see, oh, I find myself doing this at
Have
this
you ever
certain
done
time
that?
for this duration or whatever it is. In what sense?
Have you ever done that where you write down, or not necessarily, you don't even have to write down, but just think through all the little things you do in one day, and then you realize you actually do a lot more than you think you do?
I have found that in my working environment. I actually should try this in my personal life, because I do find it interesting. And basically, what it is I will usually have, because my checklist is divided into a few parts. There's obviously all the open to dos. There's a section for things that I've completed, and sometimes even during that day I'll log all the different things I did, even if it wasn't on my to-do list, just stuff that I did. I mean, I won't list things like I had lunch or I went for a coffee break,
Right, you
because
don't have
those
to
are
list
just
every little thing.
right. I'm not going to be very meticulous like that. If you wanted to, you could, but
I mean,
that's
those are
kind of aside.
like having lunch. I hope you have lunch every day.
Exactly right. You better not skip out on something like that. But anyways, I will have a section of that where it's completed, and then that sort of thing. But basically, observing those activities and seeing what may have felt like just in the moment a very uneventful day, or because maybe like a lot of the tasks might be so subconscious that you don't realize you're doing them until you list them out and you look at the list and go, wow, I actually did a lot. I
And
wouldn't
that
be
can
surprised.
be encouraging too, and motivate
Absolutely,
you to
yeah, for
keep
sure.
going.
Yeah, and I think that could probably then kind of help guide you on, okay, so this is why there's all this, this is why my day goes by so quickly, because of these tasks. And whether you want to make amends to that or to change it up or whatever is up to you. But just seeing that, I think, I guess if as a way of looking at time management, I guess if you might be thinking that you lack it, perhaps it just means that there are already things that you are doing that are making your day actually, if you kind of step back and not think about how you feel in the moment, just step back and see how potentially productive your day's been with all the tasks that you've already done anyway. In that case, basically. So I guess it can be very interesting, I guess, because tackling it is, there are many different ways I figured that it could be tackled. So there is no one hard, fast way I can recommend in terms of being able to address time management issues, because I think it can vary drastically between different things. Again, like even when we were talking about urgent matters and things that you actually have to get done versus being time management on your personal matters and, hobbies and projects and things like that. Now, again, you may not have to be super meticulous about your personal projects, but after working around all of the key, important things you'd have to do, from there, I guess it depends on how you want to look at it, really. You could probably just shuffle it. I mean, a schedule may not be set in stone. I think one thing is definitely being open to being flexible with whatever you may have on your table, because you may not have a routine, like a daily routine of things you're going to do Monday to Friday.
And like I said before, you might not feel like doing everything every day too.
Yeah,
but
exactly. I probably couldn't stream every day even if I wanted to. I think I feel like there might be some days where I'm going, gee, I don't know if I have anything, even if I have anything to stream too, because I'll just feel like I'm just going around and inviting people to watch me fly for 2 hours, which I don't think is going to be very entertaining
with
at all.
things like streaming, it is difficult because you almost have to know what you're going to be doing beforehand, and sometimes you just haven't planned ahead of time.
Yes. I also think because a lot of the things we do are project based, with the exception of maybe an ongoing, I guess never mind, it kind of is a project, like any survival world you do, or anything, like really, because like the videos you do, Meg, I guess they're kind of mini projects in themselves, so there is a start and a finish, so you're not really going to have a regularly set time for them, because you might have plans on one day, and then you won't execute it till a certain day or whatever, because and that's not going to repeat, because by the time the project's done, it's done, and so those
usually
are
it's the
not going to appear.
streams. It's usually the streams after a project is done where I'm like, okay, what do I do now? Try to figure that out.
So yeah, I guess it's just a matter of self-discipline in a sense, but obviously you don't want to be too hard on yourself when you try to exercise self-discipline, because the last thing you want to do is to, be hard on yourself at the end of it and say, if you didn't follow through with what you had wanted to do, and if you let down your self-discipline, you don't want to be, beating yourself all the way to bed and thinking, wow, what a waste of a day. I think it is
just having no regrets, I think, is the biggest thing, and making sure that if you do have responsibilities, that those do take priority. Like,
oh, absolutely, absolutely. But if you're thinking time management again in a purely personal setting, I think it's something where you just really have to be open to different ideas. Try different things out. You don't have to be fixed on one thing. And even if you want to try introducing multitasking, if you think you can get at it, as long as
I think different things work for different people.
Yes, absolutely.
I see some people do things that I could never do, and I probably do things that a lot of people couldn't do. So it really does depend on you, and you just kind of have to figure it out. Which isn't probably not what most people want to hear, but
so yeah, I kind of guess that wraps up our conversation for now.
I think so. I can't think of anything else to add.
Yeah, neither do I, otherwise I might go on a tangent. But what I will say is definitely, this conversation could go on for you, because we always welcome your feedback. And however, again, we always thank you for what you have been giving us for previous episodes, and we look forward to hearing from you for these future ones, like this one. You can always check this out and all of our other episodes on our YouTube page, which if you ever look up Gamemode Creative Podcast, you'll find it there. And on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. That's where you can find us in podcast form as well, if you get your podcasts from there, if you enjoy listening to us there, whatever the case is. Or message us as well. Our socials are all linked up. Meg, I'm sure that you're more than happy to hear from people through your DMs as well.
Sure.
in
I
a
really
way.
am. I can't guarantee that I will reply to everyone, because I get a lot of messages regardless.
Oh, that's true. That's true. So, yeah. Well, I mean, and in my case, sometimes I'm not on all too often. So there's that. I'll just put that up there. But again, you can send them. I mean, obviously, we appreciate any and all
I don't
feedback.
mind sending them. Just
absolutely.
Just don't be offended if I don't reply.
Yes, it's just.
I will read it. I will read it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, hey, until the next episode, honestly, thanks for tuning in. And I guess, Meg, we'll probably see you in the next one as well.
See you later.